My invitation to your family. What have we discovered? That the most important capital, the decimal zone, has nothing to do with money. We also learned that there are barriers to entry in some asset classes that go far beyond money. It's a function of the crowds you run with, which reflects your reputation. We heard the story of how two large legacies, both from Cleveland, made entirely different decisions that affected the path their heirs would follow for over 100 years later. The one thing societies offer is that they hold members implicitly responsible for making good decisions, perhaps on things that they never thought would have such a profound impact. It's a bit of social pressure and urgency to pay attention to things that your own ego, frankly, may not have thought of or wanted to think of. How strong is your network? For those looking to continue to formalize and distinguish their legacy, you'll want to join clubs and societies that value executing together and moving things along fast. People who drive hard, not because they must, but because they want to, or at least tell you they can't. That's a value. Ask them the same questions we spoke of earlier in this book, and then look at your impact statement. Is your current network going to get you where you need to be? When your reputation at risk, sometimes responsiveness becomes invaluable. Whether you are a well-established family office or are still emerging, we welcome both types into our clubs. We make sure every spoke has a hole on the wheel. Picture the wheel as your avatar. Your family office, or your family, is a spoke on the wheel, and you're connected to all the other spokes on the wheel. The wheel is stronger because all the spokes hold it together. Another thing we ensure is that we understand the complexity of all the issues families face. There's some nasty things that families have to deal with, and we've seen it all. We've heard it all. The languages may be different, the dialects may be different, but the drama is the same. Wealth creators work a lot of hours. I've seen some work as many as 80 to 100 hours a week. They work hard on their passion and dream. They spend their whole life putting something together, sacrificing health and relationships. There's a lot of divorce in America, but the divorce rate and depression are much higher among entrepreneurs than the general public. These people sacrifice everything so they can pass it on to the second and third generations. But the next generations face an increasingly complicated environment, in some ways a lot easier than their patriarchs and matriarchs had it, while in other ways they are really facing political and social headwinds in a conspicuous society. It's one thing to make it, but it's an entirely different circumstance just to be able to formalize a meaningful legacy. No one got there on their own. For example, in 1914, Henry Ford and naturalist John Burroughs visited Thomas Edison in Florida and toured the Everglades. The following year, Ford, Edison, and tire maker Harvey Firestone joined together on a summer camping trip and decked out to call themselves the Vagabonds. They would continue their summer road trips until 1925, when they announced that their fame made it too difficult for them to carry on. Although the Vagabonds traveled with an entourage of chefs, butlers, and others, this elite fraternity also had a serious purpose: to examine the conditions of America's roadways and improve the practicality of automotive travel. Perhaps one of the earliest cabals of impact entrepreneurs, the Vagabonds' famous road trips drove the path for the automobile to become a legitimate element of life. They demanded attention to something that the newspapers weren't focusing on at the time, that the roads were reliable and so were cars. Those frontier values were an extension of their enterprise and adventurous spirits, people who wanted to see places and experience life out of the ordinary, leadership by example. I hope you'll come away from reading this book understanding the symmetry of relationships. Traditional financial services don't build that into the framework, but we're doing it one dynasty at a time. How will your kids speak of you when you're gone? Or will their legacy be squandered, resulting in a loss of relevancy? Has anyone invited them to see what happens at the levels where influence is exchanged as the most valuable currency? To them, it's a mix of ambition and conflict mixed with fear in an uncertain world because no two families are alike. What works for one doesn't work for the other. Each one of them has their own identity, idiosyncrasies, and problems. This unfortunately leaves them all alone to manage personal and professional issues that can be solved if surrounded by a network of in-kind members. If they are on their own island, that leaves them susceptible to making mistakes that could be lethal to their legacies. This has had a profound impact on society, both conspicuous and clandestine, and it is no longer elective to ignore these powerful undercurrents of influence as such a prolific amount of wealth comes under new ownership, all at once, in real time, starting now. My invitation to you today is to leverage my influence. I spent 20 years building that influence for your benefit. Instead of spending the next 20 years building your own legacy by power and force, you can get there quicker by leveraging the legacy I've already built. You can simply continue building. Multiple families aligning their interests with each other for mutual benefit means every family will sustain, amplify, and stabilize their legacies with greater strength in this critical time of uncertainty when all the odds are stacked against them. To get from point A to point B, you need a vehicle. The club is the vehicle. Join a club and connect with other families like yours so that your family can keep its wealth when other families may be losing theirs. Stabilize and amplify your legacy right now. Think about it. 1 year from now, where will you be if you don't?